What's up, YouTube? Just like I promised in my previous video, this video is going to be about the cost of my K-swap. If you haven't seen my previous video, I talk a little bit about me and my journey with the car. Um, because the car is in storage right now, in lieu of just showing you an Excel file, which would be pretty boring, I decided that I would use some visual aids that I drew up myself to try to liven things up. So with this new format, I hope you enjoy. For this cost analysis of my purpose-built, K-swapped autocross and track CRX, I decided to sort the parts by category, starting with suspension and braking. Additionally, I don't intend to talk about every part here, but instead highlight the reasoning behind many of the decisions that I made. Starting with wheels and tires, I upgraded to 15-inch Oz rims and 205 50/15 tires. This was the largest tire I could fit without fender surgery or the use of spacers. For coilovers, I went with the older school ground control setup with helper springs to ensure alignment when unloaded. I had a lot of issues initially where I would lift the car and they would become misaligned, and I don't want to replicate that on the track, so I went with the helper springs to mitigate that. Because the car is 30 plus years old, I also replaced all the bushings, ball joints, and wheel bearings with new OEM equivalent parts. For axles, I went with Driveshaft Shop 2.9 swap axles, as I had heard they tend to be reliable, and I plan on going force induction in the future. With the added power from the K-swap, I also upgraded the front brakes with a Fast Brakes big brake kit, and replaced all the rear braking components. I also found a set of rear disc trailing arms from a CRX SI, and replaced the OEM drums with that. The original booster was rusty, so I went ahead and replaced it and switched to a larger bore sedan master cylinder. Altogether, this cost me $6,985. Moving to engine and transmission, I went with Hasport mounts with the softest bushings, as I liked the raw metal look better than the innovative ones. I also had to make an intake pipe and decided on a straight pipe with a K&N filter at the expense of slightly higher IATs. Some people do tubing through the front headlight, but I'm not quite there yet. For oil pan, I went with a steel baffled pan, as these engines sit at the lowest point in the car and are notorious for oil pressure issues, especially on sweeping turns. I upgraded the cams and had to upgrade the valve train as well to compensate for the more aggressive lift duration. In addition, mostly for peace of mind, I also upgraded a few timing components to handle the excess chain jerk due to the cam. Though I left most of the parts OEM, I did replace the ones I deemed engine critical, such as the oil pump and VTEC solenoid. I also replaced nearly every gasket and O-ring on the motor. I had the rotating assembly built, and don't have the labor included as part of the running total. For the trans, I did a full rebuild with new synchros, bearings, clutch, springs, and a helical limited slip differential from M Factory. I hope for autocross specifically, the LSD really helps to stabilize the car in turns beyond what suspension alone can achieve. Altogether, engine and transmission cost me $8,570. Next, I clumped together most of the major systems, starting with the exhaust. I went with stainless steel and kept the OEM routing for the nostalgic look. As explained in my previous video, I ended up buying 2 ECUs, and the car is running on Link currently. I also went with a K-tune conversion harness, though I think there are other options that are more plug and play now available on the web. For fuel, I went with an E85 compliant setup, and will likely need to upgrade the injectors eventually when I go forced induction. I also stuck with the OEM tank, but trashed the old rusty one that was in the car originally. For a CRX K-swap, the coolant system is a little wonky to work out. I used a combo of hybrid racing hoses that I modified along with a chase-based filler neck and hose joiner. I'll also say that the dual pass radiator is probably overkill for this setup. All together, the emissions, electrical, fuel, and coolant system were $6,260. Lastly, I made a few changes on the interior of the car for both safety and looks. I put in a racing seat with harness and auto power roll bar setup. I also went with a new steering wheel and quick release for ease of exit and anti-theft technically. I also added in some AEM gauges with safeties tuned into the ECU for both oil pressure and AFR. The interior / some of the extra mods cost me $3,172. When added together, the parts alone cost approximately $25,000. That number doesn't include the $3,500 I paid for the CRX and transport. It also doesn't include the $3,500 I paid for a running and driving RSX Type S. Add those costs in, and we are at $31,987. That number is certainly higher than I expected. However, it makes sense when you consider the lengths that I went to try to make sure that the car was as sorted as possible. There are a few other costs that didn't make sense to include in the running total. I paid $2,685 in consumables as well, but I painted my engine bay, and at one point gloves were $23 a box at Harbor Freight. I also paid for engine assembly and exhaust TIG welding, which many car guys and gals would do themselves. Same goes for tuning, which seems to vary widely across the industry and isn't included here. Lastly, I wanted to include freight as I went with the cheapest options and I still paid over $600. Despite the amount of money that I ended up spending on this, I am really happy about where the car is. I can't wait to take it out for its first race day in the near future, and I'm looking forward to learning about autocross as well as learning about track racing. I know that this kind of price certainly isn't in the budget for everyone, and I did not expect to spend this much money when I first started on this car, but as you start doing more and more things and you realize how many problems there are, as you're going through the car, you replace one thing and then you have to replace something else. And that's just like the way that it goes working with cars, and I completely understand that now. The amount of knowledge that I've gotten from working on this project has been really fulfilling for me, and I believe that the cost was worth it. And I also know that not everybody is going to go nearly as far as I went with this car. So there you have it. If you want to swap like mine, it will be around $25,000 to $35,000, assuming you do all the work and have all the tools. Once everything comes together, yours might also sound something like this. Next time on the channel, I intend to handle some steering issues with the car. Both pictures shown are the same outing, with the tires pointing straight ahead. There's definitely some sort of linkage issue, but I'll likely replace most of the rack and pinion with a quick rack instead of the OEM rack that's in there. Additionally, the car made 240 wheel horsepower on the dyno, and I intend to get some in-car driving footage very soon. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you for the next one.